Hi, good afternoon. Early evening here. Actually was able to go and get in the water in these trying days of COVID-19. There's not much that I can add to everything that's out there except just be safe. It's really interesting because I'm a kind of reclusive soul, and my wife has the same tendency to stay at home. So this uh, staying at home hasn't been that much of a challenge. In fact, it's my natural inclination or propensity. Stay at home. Don't mix, don't mingle. Read, meditate. A lot of time listening to music. Recently, I've been writing, doing some writing, and I'll talk more about that later. But again, the subject matter of this today's sharing came to me through, as has happened a lot recently, through my wife, some observations that she had made. And my sister-in-law, wonderful sister-in-law, who's relocated from Hawaii to here. My brother and her have joined us here in beautiful Hawaii. Great to have them. But she's quite the cook. And baking, most importantly, desserts is really a favorite. So a few years ago, out of necessity more or less, I started cooking some, and wasn't very good. Frankly, wasn't very good. I could eat it, but I laughed. Even if my fried egg didn't taste so good. So I started meditating on cooking and what I might. It's a good opportunity to practice Zen, isn't it? Pay attention, be here now. And that was really the turning point for me in my cooking experiment, was to devote myself entirely to cooking. And surprise, surprise, I found myself enjoying it. But still, very rudimentary skills, and our kitchen isn't exactly cuisine friendly. So I've been asking my sister-in-law, and she's such a patient soul, and recently, with her guidance, I was able to make a cheesecake because I kind of said, "Oh, I want to specialize something." And what do I want to eat? I love cheesecake, so I want to specialize in cheesecake. And she said, "Well, while you're in the process of making cheesecake, at the same time, let's do these lemon brownies. Let's do these lemon glazed little cakes in a sheet pan. Let's do that because it's good. We finish with while we're waiting for the uh, cheesecake. We can do this." So we did it. And after she spent the whole afternoon. At first, we had to go shopping, and not only did we have to get shopping for ingredients, but we had to also go to the small appliance store and get the rudimentary things that we needed to at least make this two things in a recipe. Two to make two recipes. Yes. Anyway, afterwards, my wife was participating and enjoying it, and she's encouraged me to cook because she's a beneficiary. So if I can widen my menu, it's a big problem. Anyway, she's all for it. And after spending the afternoon with my sister-in-law and my wife in the kitchen, Colleen, my wife, came down and said, "I just admire Tish's patience. I wish I was more patient." Me and herself, she wished she was more patient. And I am constantly working on patience too, as she would readily testify too. But I think I'm a little, well, there I go thinking again. That'll get me nowhere. But I was going to say believe, that's no better. Let's make a hypothetical. Maybe I'm more patient than she is, but it's not a game, it's not a measurement, it's not a contest. Anyway, she's always pretty hard on herself. So when she verbalizes something, it means that there's been an internal process that went long before it, until she considers on the hierarchy of things if it's worth putting her breath to. Is it worth the effort it takes to even mention it to me, to share? Is it worth that effort? So something that's passed her litmus test, I've learned to pay attention because she doesn't speak lightly, and she always speaks after careful consideration of every aspect. Anyway, this patience thing, and she said she was wondering why her Zen practice wasn't really helping her to be patient, and I had to remind her with the observation that, there you go, observation. Zen for me is more of a process of observing. It's not a methodology for creating a skill set, a behavior pattern, for modifying your personal behavior pattern. And I found out by exhausting my push for some elusive clarity and to mistakenly believing that clarity came from silencing the mind, and silencing mind means stop it, shut it down. Well, I've shared at length my own personal wrestle with this demon of elusive clarity, but patience. So I said, our Zen practice is more useful. Our meditation, our practice is more useful. It's more appropriate at reminding us to notice, to developing and celebrating, ultimately celebrating the witness that lies within. So, watching, listening. And then after you start to notice, then the work of choosing one of the, let's say, for sake of argument, one of the four paths, from the Hindu tradition, the four paths to the process of enlightenment. And enlightenment, of course, is not one size fits all. These four things, it's the jhana yoga, the yoga of taking information, creating knowledge, and ultimately, hopefully, wisdom. And then karma yoga through your good deeds, your good practices, and then the etheric yoga tradition, Raja Yoga. This is Kundalini and things like that. And then Bhakti. Bhakti is devotion, surrender, devoted surrender, acceptance. Anyway, my Zen practice helped me to learn how to notice, how to pay attention. It never was able to resolve anything, and that was, as I came to see it for myself, a misapplication of the principles that I was learning. Witness, develop a distance between the observer and the observed, and start to the process of mining, start the process of whichever path that works best for you. It should be pretty obvious. It wasn't my case, but just experiment and play with them. Lots of information about the four paths to enlightenment, the yogic paths, and yoga is, after all, union. So It's interesting that the union of the four might ultimately be a fifth. But in the beginning, keep it simple and find what resonates for you. Are you a man of action? Are you a man of thought or woman of thought? Are you a person of compassion, devotion, love? Are you a person that's into chi, into energy, into kundalini? Man, each of them has their own tools of usefulness, all tools, all guidance tools. But anyway, just a reminder. And then she was hard on herself. She said, well, I've been at this for a while. I just can't see the progress. And as a long time second language teacher, I had to learn a way to develop a way that would show the students that they were indeed learning. And I found, not surprisingly, that the more advanced speakers had more problem of seeing any progress. So it was my job as a teacher to point out, to try to come up with scenarios that would allow them to see. So it's my natural propensity anyway is to teach by reflecting back what I see in the student, what their tendencies are, what their strengths are, and play on them, just as I was doing here with the enlightenment paths. If I spend a little bit of time around you, I would probably be able to suggest fairly rapidly what you might want to consider, which one might be more meaningful. And there's no marriage to any one particular tradition, or no marriage to, no commitment, no binding, lasting commitment to anything important to remind myself and to remind all of us. Don't be blinded. Don't be bound. But anyway, she was expressing, and what came to me, I'm looking for something that is not too pretentious, not condescending at all. What could I say to her to encourage her? And I talked about forgiveness, and she's, everything starts with yourself. Forgive yourself. Then that's leading to the surrendering. So it started to get convoluted. And what I ended up with is something that I used to think about when I was driving through construction zones on the highways. Work in progress. And that's the theme of today's talk. We all are continually works in progress. So it's just a simple we are a work in progress. Just a reminder of the continuity, that this is not an open-ended, or it isn't open-ended. There's in that there's no end. It's an ing. It's a continuation. Not to know, but knowing. Not even to be, but being. To be or not to be, right? But I just want to stress that there's a work in progress. That's ongoing. There's no goal. There might be a step that's helpful that you can set for yourself, just in this to gauge your progress or lack thereof, just as I did with my students and their English learning abilities and skills. Are they improving? So it was very important to me. She's beautiful. She reflects. I see her like my mirror, and reflects back to me. Things bounce off of her and come right back at me. So I put out something and it comes back. And in that transformation, in that passage of time, in that activity, action, I see again, say, take a look at this on a personal level again. Let's always bring it back to you, the real you, which resides inside, and we go find it. Interesting, we end up on the outside with all the other yous, everybody else. So it's not selfish. It's not selfish. It's reflective. It's just another learning, another way of observing. This Zen training of observing. You observe the observer. Most of all, I remember being a little kid and a baby in a crib, and parents would be around. I was aware of parents, but there was something else in the corner, one of the corners, something else here watching. And I probably even verbalized to my mom, "What's that? Something's watching me." I'm sure I did. I've talked about the poor mom and the questions I was gifted with from such an early age until I became the man. I was full of questions until I didn't have any more. Didn't have any anymore. And that's pretty much, I don't have any questions. If I had opportunity to talk to anybody, I wouldn't have any questions. I would just be interested in soaking up their presence, experiencing their aura, experiencing their being together. So this idea of work in progress, we all are work in progress. And this fits right in with my forgiveness and surrender. Surrender to the will of the universe. Surrender to the song of the cosmos. So powerful, that concept for me of surrendering. And it's not just surrender, again, it's the ing, surrendering. Surrendering. Continual process. And my mantra, my personal mantra, I'm a better man today than I was yesterday. And I'll be a better man tomorrow than I am today. I live by this. I repeat it. That's the last thing I think of. Normally I will speak it out before I close my eyes. And I just forgive myself for all my shortcomings of today. And don't hold it. Don't hold on to them because they become regrets. And regrets are among the most detrimental elements of eventual shedding the ego. Regrets, memories can hold you back. But now I've shared that I'm doing some writing, and part of the writing is reflecting on my life from all the way from ground zero, and a lot of memories coming up. But it's really nice because even the deepest, the darkest, I have a tendency, and maybe most of you share that with me, that dark elements, dark times in my life, it's sort of like biological. When you have some foreign object in your body, your body naturally builds a wall around it, and seals it off. I'm thinking of a splinter I just took out of my finger, and everything, the whole process that was a foreign body, alert, alert, alert. built a wall around it, which I had to pierce with a needle and apply some pressure to get the splinter out. So I realized that the same thing in my memory, my darkest times, I encapsulated them. I put them in a section, inaccessible section of my brain. And that's really funny because everything is there. But I walled it in, I encapsulated it because it created pain. It created more negative energy than it was worth, sometimes even overwhelming. If I let it swing me and get me in the mood where it becomes darker and darker. And just as I say this, darker and darker, I can experience it. But I also hear it's always darkest before the dawn. The day is going to break, this I know. So dredging up these old memories, and no matter how grievous my errors were, no matter how unreasonable my behavior was to me and to those around me, I don't regret anything. I have no regrets, because regrets are the antithesis to any kind of evolution. I did the best that I could with the little I had, and then just move on. But again, everything for me is so tied into music. It's really interesting that the way I listen to music has changed. The lyrics, I never just la 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 la, didn't pay much attention. It's like most people, I said la 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 la. But somehow the lyrics have really been touching me, and I see so much in lyrics. But that one song, when in this regards to a work in progress, Bob Dylan, one of my all-time favorites. And I've just come to add John Prine to this group with Leonard Cohen and a handful of others that have really touched me. But the lyrics is what, for Leonard Cohen, Bob Dylan, John Prine, and others, many others. But lyrics are just so incredible. And for me, a lyric is kind of a shortcut. It's kind of a shortcut to a long process. Something that took words and hours of ruminating on and chewing on. In a lyric, you can get it. But Dylan had a song, When I Paint My Masterpiece. And he's talking about all the experiences go together. This is our masterpiece. He's talking about, it's looking at you now. And my masterpiece, for better or worse, reflects everything that's occurred. It's a work in progress. I've always thought, I wish it was more creative. And then I realized, well, my life work, this is my life work. This sculpting. Everything that I've ever done, thought. What else can I do besides doing and thinking? Dreamt. Is here. And that's each of us, unbeknownst to most of us, most of the time. This is our masterpiece. This is our work that's in progress. This is what we show the world. Or that's what the world sees, not necessarily what we show, because we all are masters of not showing, of hiding, until we stand naked and cold and abandoned, feeling all these naked, cold, abandoned, these darkest, so-called darkest hours before the light. From what I've gathered, that in some form or another, everybody that's gone through this process experiences this darkest night. In me, I shared before that I was visualized myself on a dirty sidewalk, a little helpless infant, crying, hungry, thirsty, cold, abandoned. And in the light, becoming in the light, walking into the light, you find that you're none of those things. You never were abandoned. You never were forgotten. You never were ignored. It seemed, because you're mourning the death of this false image that we're so heavily invested in. This false image of who we are. When you look in the mirror and you say, I am nothing. I am no thing. Quite the occurrence. And we'd probably be less than human if we didn't admit to some sorrow of the passage, just as someone had physically died. So too is leaving, surrendering the ego, letting it burn in the violet consuming flame. Give it up. But it's so interesting, this work in progress. It just reinforces that there's always more work to be done. We got a lot farther to go. No matter how far you've gone into the light, you can still go deeper as you start to hear, feel the song, the rhythm of the universe, as you start to physically feel the spiraling, much as our galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, is spiraling, and we're just one little nothing in the immensity of things. But there's no stagnation. It's always perpetually in motion. This is what life is: motion, movement, change, opportunities, unlimited opportunities and blessings from the abundance in which we find ourselves. One day we wake up and just see the abundancy where before we saw perhaps limitations. Limitations are only self-imposed. And as a consequence of this self-imposition, it's only us. It's through our efforts, or even our lack of effort, or efforts that set us free from our own self-created, self-perpetuated, and most times self sustained image of who and what we are. And you really can see it. We start to see how many different images. But do I have one image for my wife? Do I have another image for somebody on the street? When I first came to Taiwan, I was working in a legal office. I was editor and reviewing all the legal documents for all the departments in the, at that time, largest law firm in Taiwan. And I noticed that quite a community, there's quite a lot of employees. I had most of a building, 10-story building, full of people. So it was a big family. A sangha, in a way, a family. Not exactly spiritual, but there was a connectedness. And everybody was nice and polite within this, the social niceties of the situation. But if you went outside to get your lunch, all games were off. And I started noticing that probably, I sometimes assign things to just Taiwan. That's probably not fair, but it's because that's where I've been when I'm making these observations. Probably I would be anywhere in the world and come up with a similar, because people aren't that different, are they, after all? But outside and inside behavior. And that's when I became aware, through grace or luck or whatever, serendipity, I discovered that my inside, the person I am inside in my intimate group, and the person I am outside is one and the same. I don't have outside behavior. I don't say, oh, I'm inside, I have the social constraints of intimacy, and now I have to behave myself. But out here, I'm free, so I can just be whatever I want to be, or do whatever I want to do. Just to participate in the chaos and pandemonium of what? People, living with people, is. But maybe you can start considering about your inside behavior and your outside behavior. How you want to appear to those closest to you. Is it any different than you want to appear to every man walking on the street? And I learned somehow, I stumbled into this somehow without ever realizing it until it was accomplished, was that until I started watching and comparing and realizing the same behavior all the time. Now, one thing that I do work on, I mask what's going inside of me. I don't smile enough outside. I look a little firm, to be kind, to be a little firm, scary, mean, angry. But that's just hidden, and I need to work. Again, my wife reminds me here. She's so cute. She says, we both need to work on smiling more. She's really saying, I need more work than she does, but she's glad to participate and work on that. It's a work in progress.